everybody, happy Thursday. I hope you are doing well. This week we're going to be talking about how to write a great villain. Now, so much of the focus on writing a book goes into crafting the main character. But what about the villain? They are arguably just as, if not more, important than the main character because they are the other half to their whole, right? The magnet to their metal, the Bonnie to their Clyde, everything like that. I don't know that Bonnie and Clyde is probably the greatest example, but you know what I'm saying. But writing a truly powerful villain, pun intended, is about more than just creating an evil character. So let's dive in. Here are my top 4 things that I think you should go through to create a really great villain. And at the end, I will go through some of my top book villains and why. Who isn't a sucker for a great villain? If you have somebody that's in your mind right now, let me know in the comments. I'm super curious, but we're gonna go over that at the end of the video. So, top 4 things I think you need to keep in mind as you're writing a really great villain. Number 1 is decide what type of villain you want in your story. In general, there are 3 different kinds of villains, or 3 shapes that villains tend to take. Number 1 is the truly evil, right? So this is the person that is just absolutely horrible. There is no rhyme or reason. There's just some sort of malevolent spirit or feeling or motivation, something in them that is just, they're just evil. Number 2 is what I like to call the heartbreaker. So it's a villain that starts out as evil, but as the story evolves, as you learn more about the characters, the world, the politics, the society, the villain's backstory, everything like that, you come to understand why. Now, this doesn't excuse their evil behavior or make it any better necessarily, but it does make it relatable, understandable, and it makes it heartbreaking to be able to see how somebody who probably started off as good or at least neutral or not as evil as they are now got to this point, got to this desperation or this truly evil part in their life. And number 3 is the redeemable. Now, this is more common in a series. It can be done in a standalone, but this is the type of villain that is very evil in the beginning, but as they evolve throughout the story, they get to the point where they second guess their choices. Whether it's through happenings of the story, whether it's through interaction with the main character, which is always great to see that chemistry and how they play off of each other, or it's just circumstances have changed. It usually ends with some sort of self-sacrifice, which obviously ends with me in tears, everything like that. Like I said, that takes a lot of time and evolution, so it's most likely more for a series than it is for an individual book, but that's the 3rd type. So as you're diving into your story, whether editing it or whether you're writing it for the first time, knowing what type of villain you are going to have in your story, what you need in your story, is helpful, as you can see, because the different types can take you in a variety of different directions. So the key to deciding this is partially what you need for the plot, obviously, but it's also what do you want the reader to experience? How do you want them to feel about the villain? As I mentioned earlier, so much of the focus of writing is on the main character, right? Making them either likable or relatable, even if they're an anti-hero. But you want to think about this for villains as well, because they are the other half of the story. They are so much of the focus. So making sure you understand what type they are and how the reader is going to relate or very much not relate to them is important. Number 2 is outline their goal and motivation. Yes, outlining this and understanding this is not just for the main character. Figuring this out, and especially figuring it out ahead of time, can help you not only as you start to iron out the goal, motivation, and conflict for your main characters, obviously, but it can also help you figure out your plot points, how the story is going to move forward. It can help you enhance the chemistry between your characters, all sorts of great stuff. So this is really key in understanding the villain so you can make sure everything is layered together as seamlessly as possible as you build and craft the rest of the world or edit, depending on what stage you're at. Number 3 is how your villain is going to change or evolve. Now, this is the one that I feel like gets overlooked the most. For my first 2 points, you might have said, yeah, Susan, I know this. I know what kind of villain, even if you hadn't necessarily put it in those terms, you're like, yeah, I know what my villain wants. I know what's pushing them, everything like that. But the question I want you to ask yourself is, how does your villain change over the story? A really great villain should have a character arc as well. The plot is going to affect them, most likely in a visceral, personal way, because the villain is very passionate about what they want, need, what they're going after. I mean, that's why they're the villain, right? So as you move through the story, as the main character inevitably creates chaos and change and is trying to solve the problem, save the world, whatever shape that takes for you, how is that affecting the villain? How are they changing? And this ties in with an awesome aspect of writing a villain, and that is they don't have to stay one type. They don't have to stay one thing. One of my absolute favorite things in a story is when the villain grows and changes from one type to another. So, you know, they start out truly evil, and then book 2, they suddenly become the heartbreaker. Like, you understand why they are the way they are. And then maybe book 3, they're pushed to a breaking point where they actually sacrifice themselves for the main character, or something like that, where you're getting to see the evolution of who they are, what they want, and why this happened, why they are the way they are. Or it can happen the opposite direction as well, right? You have sort of a morally gray character, or you have kind of an anti-hero or a shady character in the beginning that slowly turns evil as you're going through the story or the series. It's so good. Now, in saying that, they don't have to change type even if they're growing and changing. You can have growth and change if you just want them to stay evil. They can just get more evil, right? But you want to have that evolution to help with your pacing, your tension, and your chemistry as the story evolves and unfolds. And number 4 is your villain going to be an early reveal, or are they going to be a slow build? And by this I mean, are the readers going to find out early on who the bad guy is, or is it going to be a part of the story that they have to slowly build and figure out what's happening and who the villain is? As with some of the other points that we just talked about, this is really helpful, obviously, when you're plotting out your story, when you're figuring out how things need to happen, your timeline, everything like that. But it goes one step deeper as well. So if it's an early reveal, you're going to need to make sure you have a really strong story arc and really strong villain character arc. Now, obviously, you want this in general either way, no matter what, but if the readers aren't trying to figure out who the bad guy is, if they already know, that mystery is gone. So what other questions, concerns, mysteries are they focusing on, and how can you have that evolve and build to make sure you still have that tension and pacing in your story, even as they already know who the bad guy is? So whether that means not knowing what they're going to do next, or building how they're going to change as a villain, or what have you, you need to make sure you still have that really tight pacing and tension. This actually happens a lot in second books in the series. So obviously, the first book, you have a smaller villain that you defeat somehow in some way, and it's revealed to be who the big evil is, or who the next evil is, right? So then book 2, you already know who the bad guy is. And many times, having that and not realizing the difference in how you need to structure and write your story because of that is what makes second books really hard to write, to have them paced correctly, everything like that, because it is different. So if you're struggling with a book 2, this might be why, but it can also happen in a standalone book as well, so it's something to keep in mind. If your villain is going to be the second, so if it's going to be a slow build to a reveal, it's going to be a mystery who the bad guy is, your plot is obviously going to at least be partially figuring that out. So the key to this is making sure your villain is involved enough that when you get to that reveal, it's an aha moment versus a who is this moment, as well as having some red herrings in there, so some likely suspects that can sort of throw the readers and the main character off the trail. This slow build type of a villain is the most common, and the above probably seems pretty much like a no-brainer. Of course, the villain needs to be in the story and you need other suspects, right? But you'd be surprised how often fixing this is a focus of my edit letters. And I'll tell you why. It's because you as the author already know who the bad guy is, or at least hopefully you do. So you are, in some respects, too close to the story. You can't always see the difference in that fine line between a hint of who it might be and too much of an obvious hint of it's this person. There's like a red arrow pointing at the villain. Some of this figuring out that sort of fine line comes with practice writing multiple books. It also helps, obviously, to have beta readers, and that's why we have editors. So this is something that you want to pay attention to, but you also want to get feedback on if this is the type of villain slow build that you're going to have. So then putting these 4 steps together as you write or revise your story and your bad guys, you can create a really hard-hitting epic villain for your story. Now, as promised, I'm going to go through some of my favorite book villains. I had to think about this because I wanted to include this. I wanted to list some of my favorite villains and why, but on the off chance that you haven't read these stories, I also didn't want to spoil it for you because these are phenomenal books. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the book or series and the author and tell you in sort of very general terms why I chose this, and then hopefully you'll either be so interested you're going to go read it, or if you've already read it, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, number 1 is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This has a really unique villain. It's really just a unique book overall. If you haven't read this or anything by N.K. Jemisin, I highly recommend it. She is a phenomenal author and you will not be disappointed. Number 2 is Fortune's Pawn, or the Paradox series by Rachel Aaron. Or actually, I think this series is written under her Rachel Bach pseudonym. Either way, this series does a really great job of getting the reader to question who the bad guy really is and what is right. So sort of that moral dilemma. Not to mention it also has some characters that switch sides, or at least you think they might switch sides. So who is really good? Who is bad? It's fascinating. She also does a really great job with her bad guys in her Eli Mon Press series. I highly recommend that as well, but I actually preferred the sci-fi, the Paradox series more, so that's the one I'm recommending here. Either way, again, highly recommend you check out all of them. Number 3 is Written in Red, or the Others series by Anne Bishop. This series I really love, not only for the world building, but also because of the multiple layers of bad guys. You have sort of bad guys everywhere, and it's not necessarily all directly the villain, but you sort of have it coming at all sides, and you're not quite sure exactly what's going to happen next because of it. I think that's the best way I can say it without giving it away. You should definitely read this series. It is phenomenal. She actually is now writing a spin-off series for it as well, so you've got lots of goodness ahead of you. And then number 4 is Angel's Blood, or the Guild Hunter series by Nalini Singh. I included this series not necessarily because of how unique the villains are, but because of how uniquely she structured her villains. So this is a really lengthy series, and it's gone on for, I want to say, like 15 books or something like that. So of course, with something that long, you have to figure out how to keep your readers invested. You have to figure out how to keep your main characters moving forward, being able to have wins and losses while still having villains, but also then having to introduce new villains because obviously things are continuing to move forward. The best way that I could think to explain this is it's sort of like if you've ever seen the Supernatural series, how they had to figure out how to keep the bad guys getting bigger and better, or worse, depending on how you want to think about it, as they continued to make more seasons. She's sort of done the same thing, but in book form, and it is so good. It's such an interesting way to move forward on things. Not to mention, she's really great at big casts of characters, so I highly recommend you check this out as well. I could keep going, but I want to hear from you. Let me know, have you read these books? Do you agree with me? Do you have other villains that you really love? I'd love to know more. Let me know in the comments some of your favorite villains and why. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps the channel. Hopefully this video helps you as you craft your villains. I can't wait to read them, and until next week, keep writing.